Hello, BookTube. Recently on her channel, Jen Campbell did a video about her most anticipated books from August until the end of the year, and talked about them a bit, and I certainly don't want it ever to be said that I'm somehow above slavishly imitating Jen Campbell, so I thought I'd do the exact same thing. I'm going to cut mine off a little bit later in the year. These are winter picks, really, late autumn and winter of this year. I tried not to go over into 2018, and I restricted myself to books that I do not have. So these are things that I'm legitimately looking forward to, you know, like any kind of fangirl, because I haven't even seen them. I very much want them just based on the description. I thought I'd share that with you because you're going to be the first to know when I get them. So the first one is this. It's Don't Save Anything by the late James Salter, the author of Sport and a Pastime. The novel, A Sport and a Pastime. But he spent his whole lifetime writing, and he wrote fiction as well as long commissioned occasional nonfiction, and that's what this is. This is the collection of those pieces which have been scattered to the winds before now. It's heresy, of course, because I think A Sport and a Pastime will probably be entering into the canon of Western literature, but I have always thought that Salter was a better nonfiction writer than fiction writer, so I'm looking forward to this, to say the least. The next one is something you might have seen it on SFF 180. The fact being that I am not SFF 180, I don't have a copy yet. I have, I think, requested one, but you know, I'm not Thomas. I'm not any kind of voice in the science fiction or fantasy industry, and also, more probably to the point, I don't review a lot of it, so probably a publicist is not, you know, putting me on the front burner. But it's City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. It's her debut novel, the first novel in an epic fantasy series, and the description makes it sound fantastic. Sunday in JP. The description makes it sound fantastic. That can always be wrong. I've had that be wrong twice this year with epic fantasies alone. But I'm greatly looking forward to it. I'm hoping somehow to finagle a copy. Then the next one is this. It's Prairie Fires. It's by Caroline Fraser, and the subtitle is The American Dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder. The publisher bills it as the very first full-dress scholarly biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder. I feel certain, just off the top of my head, that is wrong. I feel certain I remember reading a couple of others, but if that publicity tagline is meant as a gesture towards the scholarship and depth and breadth of this thing, meaning that it's an impressive work, as I think it probably is, then I can't wait. I just can't wait. The next one, the next one on my list, I only made 10. I give you 10 books here, and the next one on the list, if you're hearing fingers on chalkboard or the shattering of some sort of celestial stained glass window, any whatever sound effect that you think of that coincides with a horrific, unbelievably unlikely coincidence, that would be this, because the next book on my list was actually on Jen's list as well. It was bound to happen. We have very different tastes, but she's a very active reader, and so am I. She's constantly scanning forward, you know, on the publishing list, and so am I. And we have a lot of the same interests, just they don't tend to sort out, I've noticed. They don't tend to sort out universally with the actual books. But this one seems like a home run. I can't wait to read it. It's Ghosts of the Tsunami by Richard Lloyd Parry, and it's about the great earthquake and tsunami that struck Japan, and the ghost culture in Japan is incredibly strong. It's not just a thing of the past. I know because I reviewed a fantastic book on the subject. Believe it or not, I actually did. One of the best times researching and writing a review that I've ever had. I'll try to remember to leave the link down below. But the ghost culture of Japan immediately latched onto this tragedy. And although it's worth pointing out, especially in the 21st century, that ghosts do not, in fact, exist, the mechanism of human consciousness does not survive the machinery of human consciousness. There is no such thing as that happening. That cannot happen. Your brain is fired by the oxygen in your blood, which is pumped by your heart. If you stop that whole process, you vanish. You as a person vanish. But that doesn't say anything to the cultural phenomenon of ghosts, and makes it in some ways a lot more poignant, a lot more heart touching. So I can't wait to read this. I don't know anything about it other than that it deals in that intersection of ghosts and the tsunami, and I'm hoping that the book itself does not need reminding that there are no such things as ghosts. We shall see. If you look online, YouTube, Google, if you look online, you will see a rich subculture of alleged spottings and stories of ghosts from the tsunami. So it's a rich subject. And then the next one is latest in a series. It's a series that I absolutely love, so I'm not going to miss it. It's Persepolis Rising by James Corey, part of the Rift, the great Rift saga that he does. That I just love it. I think every book is fantastic. I keep waiting for one of them to feel phoned in. This with long SFF series, that almost invariably happens. Even if the series then goes on to regain its swing, there's always a book that feels phoned in, but it hasn't happened with this series yet. So I'm unabashedly hoping for it. Next was also part of a series. I fell in love with a little while ago, and now I can't get enough of it. It's the Clandestine Operations series by the venerable W.E.B. Griffin. This one's called Death at Nuremberg, in which he writes with William Butterworth IV. And as I think I noted elsewhere in an earlier review of this series, I have read a lot of W.E.B. Griffin, and these books don't read like W.E.B. Griffin, so I'm assuming that they are actually written by William Butterworth IV, and maybe generally plotted out over Sour Mash Whiskey with W.E.B. Griffin, and then he goes his merry way to bring royalty checks to the bank, while Butterworth does the actual work. That's the only thing the only explanation I come up with. The previous book in this series opened with a 10-page action sequence that W.E.B. Griffin, unaided, could not write if you put a rocket in his pants. So that's kind of my litmus test, and it becomes another example of something I've mentioned on this channel before, these zombie series, where the writer, even if the writer's technically alive, the creator of a series sort of steps back and other people continue it. You have Clive Cussler. We're certainly going to have Wilbur Smith. You have two people continuing Tom Clancy, both of them better writers than he is. You had, for a while there, Brandon Sanderson doing Robert Jordan, and a bunch of others. Robert Parker has two series being continued long after his death by other people, and on. And it's a long essay just waiting to be written. What it means, what the books themselves are like, what nods or homages they pay to their dead authors. I would write that essay for my beloved Open Letters Monthly, but for the year of 2017, I am busy with the tutors. But anyway, the next one is a big overpriced omnibus. I'm seriously hoping to get it from the good folks at DC Comics, who are often obliging to me. And this isn't the finished cover art, but I imagine this will be the finished cover illustration. It's a big omnibus collecting a lot of the work that the artist and writer, the fan favorite John Byrne, has done for DC Comics over the years. And I have read, I'm sure that I have at one point read and owned every individual issue that will be in this collection, but I want the big hardcover because I've always considered that Byrne is a fantastic match for DC, a much better match than he is for Marvel Comics, which are much more traditionally much more grounded in the real world, much more grounded in the quotidian, whereas Byrne, especially once he hit his stride, the Dark Phoenix saga, once he hit his stride as an artist, his work started to get very much bigger, also very much lazier. The John Byrne of 2017, just as a matter of course, does not do his own backgrounds, barely does any of his own foregrounds. It's mainly just big sweeping things, and the big sweeping anatomies and poses and action panels fit the larger grandeur of DC Comics much better, I think. So it's always had a special thrill watching John Byrne comics when he does DC. The only drawback has come in reading them, because John Byrne, for whatever his visual style is, he is quintessentially, down to his DNA, a Marvel writer. And that doesn't work with DC. It just doesn't. I'm so glad that DC has largely gotten that out of its system and is paying attention. In Marvel Comics, all of the in the traditional Marvel Comics, I have no idea what Marvel Comics is doing now. I pay virtually no attention to a Marvel Comics in which Spider-Man is an international financier, in which Thor is not Thor, the Hulk is not the Hulk, Iron Man is not Iron Man, Captain America is not Captain America, the X-Men are not the X-Men, Cyclops of the X-Men is dead, Professor X of the X-Men is dead, Jean Grey of the X-Men is dead. I don't know anything about the Marvel of the present day, but the classic Marvel, the one that stood for 50 years, the hallmark of the company was to spread neuroses through its characters. No one could be completely happy. No one could be completely confident. There had to be some element of neuroses, of paranoia or double guessing involved. And in DC, DC's comics approach has always been much different than that. Their characters are much bigger, much grander. And all of the neuroses that would otherwise be floating around in the atmosphere is all collected into Batman, who tells it to go to hell. And that works. That works really well. So trying to write the characters other than that doesn't, in my opinion, tend to work, and John Byrne tends to want to do that. But even so, this volume will have a lot of stuff in it that I don't have anymore and that I really want. Now, the next one is by Mike Duncan. It's called The Storm Before the Storm. That is a Roman gladius on the cover. And the subtitle is The Beginning of the End of the Roman Republic. And I'm looking forward to the book, even though I know I'm going to argue with it, because I already know the premise. The author's premise is that the Roman Republic was a governmental system that was working just fine until it was knocked out of balance and strained beyond any capability by Rome's rapidly expanding empire, both in Italy and beyond Italy. And that under that strain, it shattered, and that is completely wrong. That is completely wrong. There is no historical justification for that view. There is no thing you can point to and say, that proves my case. You can't even look at anything and say, that indicates my case. It just isn't true. What happened that ended the Roman Republic had nothing to do with the weakness of the Roman Republic's governmental system. It had to do with the fact that one psychopath after another, in a rapid succession of 3 or 4, decided to become military dictators, or to try to. Show me a governmental system of any kind that could survive that. None of them can. None of them ever has. I always feel a little bit defensive when people say, well, the Roman Republic was ripe for falling. It wasn't ripe for falling, any more than it also bugs me when people say that the Articles of Confederation, the original Constitution, as it were, of the United States of America, was inherently faulty and had to be improved by making the Constitution as we understand it today. That isn't true at all. That isn't true at all. You cannot point to anything. People always like to say, well, the states had to argue over every little thing. Every state had its own currency, et cetera, et cetera. But no one can go from there to proving that those things would have made for a weaker country. All those things would have done is made for a weaker central government. But that's a video for another time. But I know that that Mike Duncan is going to do that. He's going to make that case, and that's going to annoy me. But it's been a while since we had a big scholarly book on for the general audience on Republican Rome, so I'm looking forward to it anyway. The next one is Leaving the Wild, and this is by Gavin Ehringer. And the subtitle, it's a little blurry on the screen. It's called The Unnatural History of Dogs, Cats, Cows, and Horses, and it's a follow-up to his previous book, which looked just like this in the American version, and which was called Coming to the Fire, which was also about the earliest histories of domestication of certain key staple animals, and what that says about human prehistory and how that facilitated human social development and whatnot. And I'm looking forward to this book, even though the 4 cases, the dogs, cats, cows, and horses, are not the same. They're not even remotely similar in one key aspect. The cows and horses were domesticated 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. Cats have never been domesticated. They still do whatever the heck they want. But they have cohabitated with humans for a lot longer than that, for, 10,000 years, something like that. Dogs have been with humans the whole time. Not just from the beginning, but from before the beginning. Dogs and proto-dogs were with humans and proto-humans from the very beginning. They are humanity's partners, and always have been. There is no such thing. There has not yet been a convincing discovery of the beginning of canine domestication. It doesn't even look like domestication. It looks more like partnership. And that has always been true. The oldest human or even proto-human settlements or remains that you can find will have canine remains. So the unnatural history of dogs, cats, cows, and horses is a little lopsided, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not that's accurately reflected in this book. It sometimes bothers, when I read books like this, it sometimes bothers me that that the primordial nature of that particular partnership is sometimes not acknowledged, and it's important because the groupings of humans and proto-humans that were stable enough to encourage the domestication of cows and horses, to encourage the cohabitation of cats, were only made possible by the partnership with canines. If that hadn't been true, if weak, fumbling, naked, defenseless humans hadn't partnered with a pack-oriented, social dominant-oriented super predator, and that somehow hadn't worked, then none of the rest of it would have worked. I'm a little bit biased. So, and then we'll do the last one. This is the last one of the books that I am eagerly anticipating, and this one is, sorry to end on a nerdosaurus note, but nevertheless, this is a new translation of the Elegies of Maximianus, who was the translation is by A.M. Juster, whose name I do not off the top of my head know, and I can't wait for this. I assume it will be heavily annotated, and if so, it'll be the only edition of Maximianus that I have that's annotated in any way. I only have a couple of his poems on those shelves. He was a 6th century Roman poet, probably pretty much the last Roman poet while Rome was anything that resembled Rome, and according to him, he was a friend of the philosopher Boethius, who he never describes as a philosopher. He describes him as a great investigator, which has always struck me as grounds for a fantastic murder mystery series set in the 6th century Roman world, starring the two of them, with Boethius as the main investigator and Maximianus as kind of the friend, kind of the Dr. Watson. But the thing I like about Maximianus, I don't know how good this guy's translations will be, but the thing I like about him is how well he writes about old age. It seems clear to me, I mean, we don't know anything about Maximianus at all. I shouldn't be talking about him like he was a friend of Boethius or anything else. We don't know anything about him at all, except what we read in his poems, and that could all be lies. But his poetry has always struck me as the kind of thing that could only be written by someone who was old or getting old. It doesn't strike me, it's never struck me as the kind of thing that you could write by knowing someone who was old. But I could be wrong. Any of us could be wrong. But a new edition of Rome's Last Poet, that's a must-read for me. It's something that I'm very anxious for. And that's it. Those are 10 titles coming up in the winter that I'm hoping we'll see on this channel, and I'll natter on about them again. And I'm really looking forward to them now. I am in the same position now as just any other reader, even though I request and get books all the time. Because these I either haven't requested yet, or I've requested them and they're clearly not coming. So I'm going to have to wait and see. But that's it for now. I just thought I'd share a couple of these with you and let you know what's coming up. By all means, let me know what's of interest on this list. I'm assuming not many. I didn't list the Brandon Sanderson. I didn't list the Philip Pullman. I didn't list any of the stuff that I should have. Sorry, but you knew that when you married me. I'll sign off for now, and I'll see you soon.